Hi there. I'm Nick Frank, creative media producer at AgileAssets. Today on Ask the Expert, I'm talking winter maintenance with Doug McBroom. Our expert today is Doug McBroom. Doug is the operations manager in the maintenance division of the Montana Department of Transportation. In this broad-ranging leadership role, he develops, administers, and oversees statewide maintenance budgets, program plans, material resources, and workforce management activities. Recently, in 2020, he has been instrumental in launching the state's Transportation Management Center, which takes an innovative approach to integrating a wide range of maintenance and operations in the state. Doug, thanks for being our expert this month.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, Doug. So tell me a little bit about what y'all are working on at the Montana DOT.
Sure. We've been busy even in the age of COVID. So we spent all of last year working on a centralized transportation management center for Montana. Typically, we do have some sort of coverage, radio coverage, but those were decentralized out in the field, and it wasn't 24/7, 365. So on October 29th, we actually went live with our centralized transportation management center. We also had a statewide, one of the biggest statewide storms we've ever had on the same day we went live. It's always the case. But we're pretty excited about that. I think it will provide good communication, not only with our crew and safety with our crew, but I think it will also provide great communication with emergency providers, highway patrol, and other agencies that need to get a hold of us. We're going to be there 24/7, 365. So we're like I said, we're really happy with it. A couple other things we're working on. We are going through an upgrade with AgileAssets. We have a maintenance management system and the fleet that are combined to one system, and I think they're both on 7.0 and some change, and we're going to be moving that up to the latest version. So we're really excited about that because that will give us some functionality we've never had, offline work, the ability to move assets easily on a map, to have the kind of the Esri server within that is a great thing. So we're excited about that. And then one of the things that we've also done, and again, I'm excited about, and maybe have a chance to show you a little bit later on, is our material dashboard. What we've done is we've moved information out of MMS, out of AgileAssets Maintenance Management System, and moved it onto a platform that our guys can look at and drill down and look at the material use that they're using, expected material use, and so they can better understand and really focused on winter materials, but really understand if they're under-servicing a road, over-servicing a road, and basically delivering the right material at the right time to get the right outcome that we want for our folks. So.
Awesome. Well, I'm looking forward to diving into each one of those a little more specifically. But for those that may not be familiar with a Montana winter, can you tell me a little bit about what winters are like in the Big Sky State?
Sure, you bet. Thanks again for asking. Just to give you a little bit of background, Montana is the fourth biggest state in the union. And so as a result, we actually have all sorts of climates. We are in the Rocky Mountain Northwest. We're bordering Idaho, Wyoming, North Dakota, South Dakota, and of course, to the north is our neighbors, Canada. So we're about as far north as you can get. We have some of the highest mountains in the nation, and we're also the beginning of the Great Plains, depending on how you look at it. If you're going east, we're the beginning. If you're going west, we're the end. But we also have the Continental Divide that goes through our state. In terms of our winters, we have fall storms. In fact, in 2019, we had a fall storm that dumped 36 inches of snow in about 18 hours up in the northwest portion of the state. So it can, and that happened in September, so it can happen at any time. And actually it melted in September or in the beginning of October too. So we can have anywhere from, I would say, 15 to 20 feet of snow that fall on any given day. Well, not actually any given year in Montana. Anywhere to inches that sort of blow around and kind of blow off our road. So if you imagine the Great Plains where the wind never seems to stop blowing, the snow doesn't accumulate; it just kind of blows across. So it creates some challenges for our guys and that plow the roads, and it also creates some challenges for the traveling public because it decreases visibility when the wind stirs up snow and it doesn't stick. And then obviously we've got some issues in the western part of the state where we get snow stacking up to 10 to 15 feet. Where do you put it, and how do you store it? So we have all sorts of in terms of precipitation, all sorts of event across our state. We have also had a storm in 2018. Well, not a storm, but an event that had the entire state to be sub-zero from February 2nd to March 15th. So you hear about the winter cyclones across the United States. Montana has its own winter cyclone, and it doesn't get nearly the press coverage that we get, that the rest of the state gets. So the climate's challenging. Winter removal or snow removal is challenging, and it's expected from the folks who drive through Montana that we're out there and making sure that the roads are safe for them and for our families.
Now, it's funny when you talk about that because I can relate. I grew up in those plains in North Dakota, so I totally understand when you say 3 feet of snow and these sub-zero temperatures, but I know there's a lot of people listening that are going to go that haven't seen 3 feet of snow in their entire lives. So that's interesting. Can you tell, why and what are some of the challenges that y'all face when it does come to that winter maintenance? Because some people may not truly realize how challenging snow makes your maintenance challenges.
Sure, it actually is probably our number one activity that we do in Montana. We typically spend $30 million a year. Sounds like a little bit when you compare it to other states in the United States, like Washington. I think they have a snow budget of 100 to 150 million a year, but we maintain about 12,000, almost 13,000 centerline miles or 26,000 lane miles of road. We have a lot of challenges. Like I said, we have got the Continental Divide in Western Montana. We have probably over 15 passes in Montana that we have to maintain. We have the largest freshwater lake west of the Mississippi, so it has its own climate as well. That's Flathead Lake. Again, we do have the Great Plains where the snow accumulation may not be vertical or horizontal, it's vertical in those areas. But yeah, snow removal is probably our number one, well, it is our number one winter maintenance activity. It's what we hang our hats on. And again, it's what our traveling public expect us to be able to do. But it's never the same storm. It's never the same area. It's never the same topography. We have canyons that the sun doesn't seem to shine from December to March. So we have a lot of potential ice and some other things. When you're doing winter maintenance, the sun is your best friend. Any kind of solar, even if it's cold, the sun is your best friend. And a lot of times we just don't get that in Montana. We do use sanding material. We do use a little bit of salt within that sanding material, and we do use de-icers to help us deal with snow and ice removal. But really, it's the effort in the mechanical removal from our snow plows that we use. So.
Can you dive into a little bit more of those ways that you are managing these challenges that y'all face with your winter maintenance?
Sure. So Montana is not in what has traditionally been called in the United States the Rust Belt. The Rust Belt has occurred. In fact, Nick, you probably were in part of the Rust Belt, being in North Dakota. But in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, well, even before that, there was a huge push to use straight salt in some of these Midwestern states. Midwest gets a lot of the same climate that we do, a lot of heavy snow, and quite frankly, because the Great Lakes are close by, a lot of heavy wet snow. And so a great way to deal with that is to use salt and straight salt. And so what's happened is then the cars coming out of there, and even some water sources, cars have been rusted and water sources have been contaminated because of the amount of salt that people use out and material. Montana has had its own challenges with some of the material we use. So we have some of the most pristine waters in the United States. Some of the best blue ribbon trout fishing. I won't tell you where that is, but it's good. But we also used a lot of traction sand, and traction sand next to water isn't necessarily a good thing, because it does wash into the waterways as sediment. But it actually plugs what's called a red. A red is a fish hatchery, and it stops really the fish from procreating or hatching, I guess. So we have started to use a little more brine, a little more salt. We've done a couple things to help us out. We put a inhibitor, a rust inhibitor in our material, to make sure that our material is doing as little damage to automobiles as we can. But if you compare us nationally, even our neighbors, we're usually anywhere from using the quarter of the salt that other areas do to 2% of the salt. New York uses a million tons of salt a year. We use 50,000 tons of salt. So, I mean, just to kind of give you a kind of a comparison. So that's a challenge, and it's absolutely expected. That's what Montana's a great tourism industry. People come here to visit Glacier National Park, Yellowstone National Park, and the last thing we want to do is foul up the environment due to our winter practices. So we have to be very cognizant and careful about that. And we also have to weigh cost in that too. So our material is expensive. Sand is probably one of the most expensive materials that any DOT uses. Because you pay for it multiple times. You pay for it when you buy it, you pay for it when you spread it out, and then you pay for it when you clean it up. And it is one of the most expensive winter materials to use. But it's, salt has its issues, and brine has its issues, and Medchloride has its issues. So those are some of the challenges that we face. And really, it's sort of weighing level of service on the roads, safety on the roads, and environmental and material costs.
I think this may end up being the only interview where we talk about fish reproduction. So I'm really happy we were able to dive into that a little bit. That's, a fun little twist on the Ask the Expert. And we'll come back next time and we'll talk to Doug McBroom more about fish hatching and hatcheries. That'll be the next one. So you talked about some of your challenges that y'all are facing, and there's not a lot of easy fixes for it, but what are you doing to kind of combat some of those?
That's a great question. So we are doing quite a bit. I think the winter dashboard, which I'll show you here as part of this explanation, is one of the best things that we could do, and that gives folks real-time information on the material that they're using, how much they're using. We do track where they're using that material as well. And one of the things I've taken for granted, so in 2017, we went to AgileAssets and we moved our old system. And our old system was actually started as a DOS-based system, and was developed back in 1984. It was replaced in 2017, so we got our life cycle out of it. But part of that system, there was no real-time inventory. And in the last 3 years, the greatest benefit I've had from using a new maintenance management system, and Agile's in particular, is having an idea of real-time inventory and real-time material use. Before we went live with AgileAssets, we'd have a reporter call and say, how much material did you use? That was a big storm. How much material did you use? And I said, I don't know, but I'll tell you in 2 weeks. And no one cares in 2 weeks. Being able to use AgileAssets system has been just critical for that. So one of the things that we've done is we've taken a view from AgileAssets material use on day cards, and we put that into an easily consumable system. So if I may, Nick, I'd like to share my screen and kind of go through that with you.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so right now you should be seeing a blue MDT maintenance operations reporting tool at the top. Okay, perfect. So we've got a few things on here, but really the meat of what we do is our material dashboards. The targets are, that'll kind of become obvious in a minute. But if we click on our material dashboard, we've got our material use, and we've got it starts up at statewide, and then just like every United States Department of Transportation, we have different areas within Montana. We have five districts, and in each of those districts are 2 maintenance areas. And within each of those maintenance areas, we have anywhere from 10 to 15 garages is what some people call them. Sheds is what some people call them. We call them section houses, but it's all the same. We divide out our work across the state of Montana. Statewide, this is current data too. So statewide, we've used 1.5 million, almost 1.6 million gallons of our salt brine. So we're at about 25% of our normal yearly use. We've used 53,000 yards of, almost 54,000 yards of sand. That's about 28% of our use. We've used about 70, just 750,000, just shy of 750,000 of our mag chloride. And we've plowed, about 1 million miles of roads in Montana, and that's from October to right now. And that's about we're about 25%, a little bit over, closer to 30% done with our winter. So these are all sort of in line to what we see. That's nice for me at the statewide level, but it may not be very telling for the guys that are dealing with each of their areas. So Missoula, you can go down, and Missoula has 2 divisions within Missoula, or 2 areas. They have the Missoula and Kalispell. This is in northwest Montana. For those of you, it's actually west of the Rocky Mountains, and they have a very wet and moist climate in these areas. And actually, they use by far and away probably the most of the brine and mag chloride that's used in the state because of the climate they're in. But if I go to the Missoula division, what we have is and this is where it kind of gets interesting. We have a dashboard to help our maintenance chiefs understand kind of where they're at in some of the material use. So if you look at the Missoula division right now, they're using right around 14 gallons of de-icer per plow mile. A little high. We don't want to see that. They'll start to back off on that. Plus, it'll get a little colder, and they'll put that tool away for a little bit. So that needle will come down over the year. Mag chloride, they're right on. They're in the green. That's kind of what we expect to see. They're using just shy of 2 gallons per lane mile. And then their sand, boy, that's about as perfect as you can be. They're at 210 pounds of salt sand mix per lane mile. So this gives the chief some idea of, say, hey, this is where I'm at a division. But I don't like to see this. I'm a little high on this. So where's that at? So they can actually dig down and look at this a little bit closer, and they can look at maybe Missoula and say, all right, Missoula always uses way too much brine. So where are they at? Well, no, that's not my problem. Missoula is actually not using nearly the brine that they've used in years past, but they're way over on our sand use. So let's look at, Sealy Lake uses mag chloride, so I wouldn't look at them. I'd look at another section, and these are all just towns in Montana, but just to understand that we're just looking at it section by section. So it looks like these guys aren't too terribly bad on their brine as well. Actually, I know probably who's bad, so I'm going to go over here. No, Evro's not. So I'm not sure why they're high on their brine, and I'm not going to spend time investigating that. But that's an easy thing to look at if you were a maintenance chief. All real-time data. So the moment our guys approve a work order, and specifically the moment they approve the material card, a day card on a work order, this information is now translated into the dashboard. Our guys have access to this. They can look at it daily. And quite frankly, just by having access to this, our folks are being more attentive to saying, hey, what am I using? A lot of times, I think people, and it's general tendency with people, if using a little bit works, using a whole lot should work even better. And that's not the case with winter materials. So this is a good way for our guys to look at and kind of understand what they're using, how much they're using, and involved in that, or to come full circle, that allows us to be sensitive to the environment, allows us to give a safety component to the road, so our traveling public is traveling on safe roads, and we're servicing those roads exactly how we should, and we're being cost effective. We implemented this by having this real-time data. We implemented this last year. Last year, we did it through a spreadsheet and a pivot table, which is one of the reasons we went and set this up as a program. But in one maintenance area, we have 10 of them. One maintenance area, we saved over $500,000 on the yearly average that they had over the last 2 years where they didn't use it. So it's a substantial savings. It's important to have our guys do it, and it really meets all of our goals as a department to again, safety, environmental friendliness, and cost effective.
Well, that's fantastic. Thank you for giving us a little dive into that tool. That was really impressive. That was a great job by y'all and your staff.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I'd like to take credit for it, but I can't. It was someone who was much smarter and in tune in that with me that had the idea to do it. We just developed it and made it statewide.
Wow. Well, that's really impressive and a really good work on y'all to be able to do that. As we continue to talk a little bit about data, you showed us some really great data tables. For Montana, what are some of the most important data points to collect to ensure that you're going to have some effective winter maintenance?
So one of the things that we do is we collect where the winter maintenance occurred, and everybody, it doesn't matter if you're from the United States or from Europe, everyone who works with winter maintenance has gotten some sort of complaint. It's been snowing here for days, and I haven't seen a plow, and I've got 4 feet of snow. And what people don't realize is we don't have same time snow removal. So the first snowflake that falls doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to remove it. And that's a process that takes some time, and we actually do have plows out. So the location of where we're plowing is extremely important. And we did a few things with Agile that's a little bit different, I think, in 7.0 than a lot of people do. On the find location, or I'm trying to remember the accomplishment pane, find location. We set that up slightly differently so that all you had to do was put basically where you were and the miles that you plowed or the units that you worked, and then AgileAssets actually automatically calculates the percent to which road it goes. So they didn't have to do that manually, and we did that really to basically make it easier for our guys to use and actually put the locations that they did it in. I think if we wouldn't have done it, they would have put all the plowing to one road and been done with it, because it's easy, but also because it's somewhat hard to figure out percentages and some of the things like that. I mean, they're there, and they're very talented at driving equipment and managing some of that stuff, but it may not be terribly interested in doing math like maybe me. So we made it easier for them. So location, there's a long explanation to give you one element, location. Obviously, we're very interested in the amount of material that we use. From the dashboard, you can see, and having the ability to have real-time inventory is huge for us. It just changed the way we did business, and we're much more effective on doing it now. And then sort of the type of work and what the work's being on. So this is a little bit outside winter maintenance, but we took advantage of AgileAssets system. We have every asset that we work on essentially is in AgileAssets. So all of our guardrail, all of our signs, all of our roadways, all of our center jersey rails, all of our VMS signs, basically, or excuse me, our variable message signs, basically everything that we could possibly work on as an asset, a roadway asset, is in the system. So it allows us to do a couple other things too. It allows us to track if we've got a problem child asset, something that we're spending a lot of time on. And then actually that's sort of gives you an idea of maybe some improvements that can happen when construction comes through and reconstructs the road or touches the road again to make maintenance even easier. So those are the metrics that we really track. So it's material, labor, equipment, and then obviously it comes down to location and type of asset that we're working on.
So you typically are tracking a lot of different elements and a lot of different information. Well, how are you collecting that information?
So right now we're collecting most of that through AgileAssets, and again, using different tools. The dashboard being the first one, to make that reporting a little bit easier. Our guys are, like I said, they're really good at what they do. They're excellent, and some guys are really good at even working with the software and developing reports. But not all of our guys are that. So making a tool that's easy to access for them is really important. We're also tracking, through other software programs, other things like our road conditions in the wintertime. So our transportation management center, which I mentioned at the beginning, puts out information on the condition of the roads for winter travel, so that the traveling public, before they decide to go out, they can go and look at the website or the information and make a decision on whether or not they want to travel. And we're collecting that through something called a road reporting system. And eventually I'd like to see that tied with the maintenance management system as well, so we can see the condition of the road, and then when we treated it, what we treated it with, and kind of what happened. Did it go from snowpacked and icy and so somewhat dangerous driving conditions to wet and clean? So those are the things that we're looking for in the future, but that's how we're collecting most of our data.
And when you have your data, you're following it, you've got it collected. What performance measures do you track? And then how do y'all track success in your system? So how do you know, okay, this is our performance measures, it was successful? How do you kind of track that?
Sure. So right now we're not terribly sophisticated. There's lots of folks who have a great deal of performance metrics that they measure and a breakdown on how successful they are. So one of the things that we measure is our material use and how much we're doing, and then the condition of the road as a result of us doing that. So we gather that data, and we have something called a level of service. Most states that have snow and ice removal have some sort of level of service, or an expectation that the public can have during a storm event. Is really a easy way to think about level of service. So we have certain guidelines. It's, our interstates after a storm event, 4 hours after a storm event, we want to be down to wheel tracks, which sounds, ooh, that's scary. But if you got dry pavement and you got wheel tracks, as long as you're not going the other way, that's a good thing. And then that becomes as the system changes, the level of service changes. So in our secondaries and our lower volume roads, we have an expectation that those will be down to wheel tracks within 12 hours or 24 hours, depending on that. So those are some of the ways that we measure, at least for winter maintenance, what we're doing. We also have developed a maintenance quality assurance program, and that's using the data again from the maintenance management system, where we're going out and looking at the condition of some of our assets. Signs are one, culverts are one, our separated bicycle and pedestrian paths are another, and we look at the condition of those and basically give a grade to those. assets, and then we have a direction or a way to, if it's starting to fall below an acceptable grade, we can recognize that and address the problem assets that have an issue. So that's another way that we measure. Those are the analytics that we look at, and we measure success by the grade. So, an F is an F. And so if we have a F grade on some things, we know we need to attend to it. And we know we're not successful. We like to see, I like to see Bs or above on some of those for our MQA. And for the most part, we're there. But there are some areas that we have below a B and we need to address, and we are using the system to do that.
You mentioned analytics, and I want to follow up on that specific kind of word that you used. How have analytics helped the Montana DOT improve winter maintenance and the activities surrounding that?
Well, it allows me to have information-based decisions. So that's the most important thing. Before I did have the information, but again, it was usually 3 weeks past when the event occurred. So it was awfully hard to remember what happened, or even if I tracked it, to then match what we did in any meaningful way to the data that I got out of the old system. So having the ability to track data in the immediate is huge. Having data that supports any decision we make is even more important. Data-driven decisions are key to being successful, I think, in the public or private sector.
And how has that helped y'all improve in terms of maybe materials, how you use those, maybe some cost savings, staff utilization? How has that helped progress those areas?
Just by paying attention to what we're using, how much we're using, and having a target for each of the sections has really given us a savings in material use. And it's kind of funny because people are saying, well, if you back off on the material, you're going to back off on your level of service or how the condition of the roadway for the traveling public. But what we really found is we were over servicing these roads. We were using more than we needed. So material control is an important thing, and it's changed for Montana dramatically. I mean, they're in the old days of treating snow and ice. Some areas, not in Montana, but some places would basically have raw salt in the back of their dump truck, and as they were driving down the road, they would simply raise the bed and have the salt come out. In that, there was no material control. Sure, the road got serviced and probably over-serviced because it melted everything that it needed to melt, but there's no material control. You don't know what you're putting out for use, and you're certainly causing some rusting issues and some other issues in not only your infrastructure, but the other vehicles. So really understanding what we're putting out and how we're doing it, and focusing on materials was a big one for us, again, to balance the environmental needs of the state, the safety of the traveling public, and economics has really changed our business and our ability to do it. Staff utilization has really changed since we've implemented our new maintenance management system. This is one of the few times technology really has given us a benefit. A lot of times technology is technology, and the workflow is still the workflow. But by saving time, by saving the number of folks who have to enter data in, really allows our staff to be utilized in different ways, and transferring the responsibility to the folks who are actually doing the work in terms of entering the data has been big for us too. They're the ones closest to the data. They understand what they did, and they understand how it should look in any management system.
And following up a little bit on your staff, how have your safety and maintenance been working together?
the biggest benefit we just got was by standing up the Transportation Management Center that we had in October. So some states in the United States have their highway patrol, which is a patrolling police, basically, that are responsible to ensure safety on the highway. Some of those are within departments of transportation, and some of them aren't. So we're a state that doesn't have the highway patrol within us; they're under the Department of Justice. So our communication with them was really good in the wintertime, where we had 24/7 coverage in each of the 5 districts. But it was really lousy during the spring, summer, and early fall when winter wasn't there. So our communication with just by having a centralized transportation management center with highway patrol has improved dramatically. There's one spot they can call. Our relationship with them has improved. They're actually in the same, their dispatch centers in the same city, the capital, Helena of Montana. They're in the same city that we are. And so our relationship with them is that much better. We can call them and say, hey, we just found out we got an accident. You may want to dispatch your highway patrol to help. So our safety in terms of our policing is better, but our safety even with the fire districts and the emergency services, all of which respond to accidents in rural Montana is better, because there's one spot for them to call. And if there's an accident or something that happens, we can be the conveyor of communications to the folks that can help out from our maintenance forces. So I think that's probably one of the biggest things that's helped us.
Yeah. And I know you're a busy guy, so I'll ask you one more question and then we'll wrap up. Montana is a massive state. You've mentioned it has a vast geography. And so winters can be harsh. They can be different. There's different kinds of elements that y'all are getting hit with. So this is a great question to ask someone like you who manages, because there's a lot of states that go through winter. There's a lot of countries that go through winter in a different ways. So what advice would you give an agency to take their winter maintenance to the next level?
The first piece of advice I'd have you do is track what you do. Is track and save what you're doing on the road to do that. So you can't necessarily control how the guys react, and I don't want to second guess my drivers, but I want to know what they're doing so that I can better understand why they made that decision, and what we're doing as a state. And the second thing, and this is the most important, I'd like to take credit for this, but it was a college professor of mine who said, does it make sense? Keep asking yourself, does this make sense? And if you find something happens in a storm event and you go back and you're looking at work units and the area was out and doing work and they may have only said they plowed 5 miles, and gosh darn well they plowed probably 500 miles. That's the kind of questions that you need to ask yourself. On a statewide basis, I certainly don't look at what each individual person does, but at a statewide basis, I ask, does this make sense? Does this data make sense? And what is this data is telling me? It gives me 2 things. It gives me quality control and quality assurance. So once I understand what the data is and the data is good, then I can make a good informed decision about how to deal with that next time. Whether that's to ask for more employees, to get better trucks, to get more material in an area. But if the data is good and I'm tracking it, then I can make a well-informed decision about how to deal with it the next time.
Doug McBroom, Operations Manager at the Montana DOT. Thank you for sharing your expertise with us today.
You bet, Nick. I appreciate the opportunity.
If you want to learn more about how Montana is managing their winter maintenance or any other asset management solution, head on over to AgileAssets.com. I'm Nick Frank, and we'll see you next time on another edition of Ask the Expert.